Number 9.
Well, one of those guys is actually coming up here at number 9. It's a much more recent CrossFitter, and it's Brent Fikowski. And Brent's an interesting case study here, and really, James, this is where we can start to talk about what some of the criteria is. In assessing and compiling this list, I think the most challenging thing was the fact that the last 2 years, 2019 and 2020 years, were so different from everything that we'd known before. And so we can just look at Brent's performances at the games. He first made the games in 2016. He was 4th. The next year he was 2nd. The next year he was 4th. Then we had the huge overhaul of the system and the way that people were able to qualify and what actually happened when you were at the games in terms of scoring and cuts. And then the next year was COVID and the online version of the games. And in those 2 years, he did make it both years. He ends up finishing 23rd and 15th. Now, the weird thing about that is in the midst of those things, there were a lot of outside competitions. He competed at 3 competitions during the 2 sanctional years where he finished 1st, 2nd, and 1st. So when we look at the totality of his kind of competition resume from 2016 through the present moment, the massive outliers are the poor performances in the 2019 and 2020 games. And so we're going to talk about some other guys on the list that had really good performances during that time. The question is, how heavily do you weight those relative to the fact that he's been in the top 4 his other 3 years at the games and 1st or 2nd all 3 times he's competed outside of the CrossFit Games season in sanctional events. He also has 6 career event wins at the games. And basically what I'm saying about Brent Fikowski is if he comes back this season and places inside the top 4, he's probably going to jump up 2 to 4 spots on this list.
And of all the athletes, just off the top of my head, he would be probably the best underwear model. Like if he were to parlay this into a modeling career. I'm just like, this picture that we have of him is amazing. But if he was in some Calvin Klein underwear on a billboard over the Santa Monica Freeway, sales would go up.
Is this where Tia beat him in that workout?
It might. I think her and Christy are sneaking up right behind him here for the run, swim, run. Technically, he did cross the finish line before them, but I think based on the chip timers, they might have had a faster time than him because I think the girls had to start like 5 yards behind the men.
Yeah.
In Brent's defense, maybe if he would have thought that they were going to beat him, like if it was if it wasn't on chip timers and it was just like the foot race, maybe Brent would have won. That's a tough one. Someone's saying Brian has serious Wi-Fi issues. Don't worry about that because we will make a clean copy for YouTube that will go up this evening. Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Red.
What do you think's keeping him out of the top from not getting on the podium?
At the games?
Yeah.
Well, he did make it 1 year. He finished 2nd in 2017, and I think he's got a good chance to make it on the podium this year. But, like I said, this is a pretty defining year for him at the games. He's already 30 years old. It's not to say that people can't have success at that age, but if he's able to podium this year at the games, I think even if he finishes in the top 5, then it's pretty solid in my mind that we can basically omit his finishes from 2019 and 2020 as not being representative of his fitness relative to the other top guys in the sport, and then we can say what I think is the case, which is, those 2 years were just too different for us to consider them at the same level as any of the other years where all the athletes got to do a majority of the test.
Let me fire the question back at you, Hobart. And what do you think's a bigger handicap? Number 10, who Brian has, is Josh Bridges being a smaller athlete, or is the bigger handicap Brent Fikowski being 6 feet tall or whatever he is, 220 pounds?
Not so much the height. I think it's just the weight difference. I think honestly, being a little bit bigger is better. So smaller is a bigger handicap, I think, at this point in CrossFit.
I think you're right. So you're saying Brent should cut his body fat from 5% to 2%.
No. I mean, I think the weight helps him. I think the weight helps him.
Okay, but it's still a in maybe theoretically, just based on the numbers, in an ideal world, he would be 2 inches shorter and 20 pounds lighter, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.